Okay, everybody. My name is Chris Short. I run Alpaca Ranch Recording here in lovely Central Florida, and we are most definitely on quarantine, as you can probably tell by my hair. This is the first installment in our YouTube series called Hit Record. It's really just about little tips and tricks around the studio. I run a mid-level studio. I don't have any platinum records. I don't have any, I'm not on any TV shows, but what I do have is a ton of experience recording smaller local bands, and I work a lot with bands who've never been in the studio before, never played to a click track before. There's a lot of little things that I've kind of learned doing things like that, like not on a major level, not with huge budgets, that just kind of make the studio process like a little easier and a little more pleasant for everybody. My goal is to try to keep the technology as invisible as possible so the musicians kind of forget that they're recording. And I just want to specify right away, I'm not trying to be Eric Valentine. I'm not trying to be Vance Powell. Those guys are amazing. They're going to talk about how to get a killer kick drum sound and all these little kind of sonic tips and tricks. I'm mostly going to focus on just nuts and bolts stuff, like how to set up a certain headphone mix that sounds better and how to trick the singer into forgetting there's a microphone in front of them, stuff like that. So, and since this is our first one, I'm going to start with something very, very simple. So let's go. This one's all about the click track. Again, like I said, a lot of bands can't necessarily play with a click track for the whole song. Sometimes there's weird tempo changes that you just don't have time, or you don't have the ability to figure out before the band starts tracking. Things like that where the click track isn't necessarily appropriate the whole way through the song. The session I have up here is from a band, well, actually a solo artist, named Trent Little. He's very, very good, killer songwriter, killer voice. And this is a live drum session we did with a scratch vocal and a scratch guitar part. Now, I'm going to play it back for you, and I think you'll kind of realize that this type of music isn't really appropriate to be like perfectly right on the grid or perfectly right on the click track. And you'll see why in a second. So there's our live drums. Drums feel good. They feel really good. We know we're going to go back and do bass and guitars later. That's fine. But then listen to what happens when the click track comes in. Oh yeah. That's not even the same ballpark, right? But the thing is, once you take the click track away, everything sounds just fine. So why bother with it? So now you're asking me, well, what if you need consistency in the takes? Well, you do need consistency in the takes, and you kind of want everybody to start at the same vibe, because it's so easy for musicians to get excited and everything starts going faster and faster and faster and faster. So like take by take by take is what I mean. So the way to do that is to start the click track when the track starts and have them come in and then turn it off. Sounds great, right?
All right, let's do it.
And you can hear them talking in the background because that's how musicians communicate. And then here we go. Right there, everything's on the money, right? Pretty cool. Sounds good. Feels good. Yeah. But we knew we didn't want to be locked into this click track the whole dang song. There you go. See, it's already getting off. So what do? You mute the click track. Sure, that's great. That works perfectly well if you're not thinking about 400 other things while you're tracking live drums, live guitars, and live scratch vocals with people in the other room. So it's just one more button to push while you're trying to watch levels and listen for mess ups and all that other stuff. So the way that I have found that is the easiest way to make that as simple as possible so you set it up and then you don't have to worry about it is to simply commit the click track. Okay, so this is the third time I've tried to do this, and hopefully our little screen capture software here will play along. The other two did not record any of the drop-down menus I was trying to use, which in Pro Tools is kind of a big deal because there's a lot going on there. Anyway, so obviously I'm using Pro Tools. I will reiterate that later. Anyway, okay, so to commit a click track. Committing any track is very easy in Pro Tools. It's a relatively new feature, especially for those of us who have been using Pro Tools since the Stone Age. And a lot of other DAWs have it, had it way before Pro Tools. Avid, we're looking at you. But it's here now, we use it all the time. It's super cool. Really all it does is allow you to render any of the effects, especially real-time effects. Like I got a little gate here, I got EQ there, into a totally separate file, and so leaving the original essentially untouched. And that way these guys don't have to run in real time anymore, frees up a little horsepower on your computer, and kind of finalizes things. I use it a lot for creating mix archives and sending stuff out to other mix engineers or any other engineers who might need like stems or anything like that. And the cool thing for us, because we use a lot of outboard gear, is it'll also process and render outboard gear too. So that's cool. That's cool. It's very handy. And it's really easy to use. You literally just go click on the click track, make sure it's highlighted like that, then just go to commit. That's all. Now, one thing, especially for the click track, that I find myself tripping up on all the time, can't even tell you how many times I've forgotten to do this, is make sure the metronome, the actual click track in Pro Tools, is on. See this little guy. You can do it pretty easily by just clicking on that little icon or hitting 7 on your numeric pad. I can't tell you how many times I've done this, is render or commit down a click track and not have it on, because the commit function takes whatever is there and just prints it. So if it's not there, it's not going to get printed. So we're going to do, make sure that dude is on. I'm going to go right click, hit commit, and then there's a couple options in here. We don't need to worry about a ton of them, but very briefly, it'll ask you what you want to commit. You can do edit selection or selected tracks. We're going to do the whole track. Consolidate clips. All that means is if there's a bunch of little clips on the track, you know, a bunch of edits you've made, it'll basically render them all down to one big file. You know, the automation stuff we're not worried about. The sends and group assignments we're not really worried about. Doesn't really apply to the click track, but we might get there later. So, you know, hold on to your butts. And then what I like to do is insert after the last track, after the selected track rather. So that way it shows up over here. It's nice for me because everything kind of stays organized. Click tracks right by click tracks, etc., etc. And then we want to hide and make inactive the source track. You guys can really do whatever you want. I just prefer this because that way, if there's anything I do need to get back to, I can get back to it. And if there's something that, you know, needs to be changed or somebody changes their mind later, especially with bands that can't really make up their minds, that's a really handy function. Okay, so we're just going to commit our click track down. And there it is, just a big old handy WAV file. And now we can cut this up however we want. We can mute sections, we can unmute sections. And honestly, having a WAV file instead of a real-time plugin actually makes your computer run a little bit with a little bit less strain. It'll take a little bit of overhead over it. Not a ton, because the click track's not like super intense. But, you know, every little bit counts sometimes when you've got 150 tracks in a session at 96K. So anyway, that's that, and I really hope this one worked. Now back to your regularly scheduled programs. Now, I'm sure you guys can tell I'm working in Pro Tools. I don't know what you guys are working in, but I guarantee you somewhere in your DAW, there is a way to do this. So what I'm going to do is I've got a 2-bar count off right here. So I'm going to let them go for maybe 2 more bars. We'll go to bar 5, say, and then just simply mute the rest of the click. And the reason I do that is twofold. Now the click is an audio file, and it's actually easier for the system to play back than it is if it was like a plugin running in real time. So any of you with like maybe a older computer, or like you already maxed out on tracks or inputs or whatever, that's a good way to kind of like ease up on the horsepower that the computer needs to work properly, because there's nothing worse than being in the middle of a take and getting that error message that says, hey, by the way, you're done and we just stopped your session for you. And so much for that take. So now what you got, as you can hear, we can turn the click track off, and then we just got an audio file. It's just going to play it right back.
All right, let's do it.
And it's going to cut off right where you want it to, which is super handy. Right on the money, click track's right where it needs to be. Everybody's set up, feeling the groove, settling in, and then they're on their own. And these guys happen to be really talented. The drummer is one of my favorite studio guys to work with. His name is Dean Andrews Jr. Dean Andrews Jr. Look him up on YouTube. He's just phenomenal. We actually do a bunch of remote sessions with him out of here, which is a lot of fun because we get to meet people we would never have run into in real life. And especially now that we're on quarantine and it's like, you know, we can set something up and record from wherever. So anyway, that's my little click track turny offy turny on-y trick. And then the reason I hang on to the rest of this is because you never really know. You might need more, you might need less. You might have to start another take out here and have the same starting tempo, which is sometimes happens. But for these guys, we really only did a couple takes, and we knew right away with the one we wanted, and ended up just punching this last little bit in, which is cool when you can punch drums. Did I bump it? Yeah, there we go. So yeah, and I don't know if you noticed or not, but this click track doesn't have any accents on it. It's simply just on the quarter notes. And the reason we did that is in case, so they could kind of get started whenever they wanted, and the click track would still be there. So the one didn't necessarily have to be one. all that means is, you know, when you're moving stuff around and getting your mix session ready, if it matters to you, like sometimes it just doesn't, if the one is on one or not, then you just slide it over and put it where it's supposed to go with grid mode on. So anyway, that's my little click track trick. I hope that helped. And welcome to Hit Record. We're hopefully going to do more of these because, like I said, we're all on lockdown and there's not much else to do. Thanks so much.